Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to this G4S Academy webinar, which is on the role of leadership in fostering a security culture. I'm your host for today. My name is Noah Price, and I'm thrilled to be guiding you through this vital conversation. Now, in today's complex threat landscape, a robust security culture is no longer a luxury. It's absolutely a necessity, and leadership obviously plays a vital and pivotal role in shaping that culture. So we're here today to dissect that role, to understand how leaders can empower employees, align security goals with business objectives, and build a culture of shared responsibility and vigilance. So over the next hour, we will delve into three critical aspects of leadership's influence on security culture. And we're going to hear from three distinguished experts in the field, each offering their unique insights and their perspectives. Following these insightful presentations or talks, we will open the floor for a Q&A session, and I'll pose some pre-prepared questions to our panelists. And then we will take questions from you, the audience. So please feel free to type your questions into the chat function, which you'll see is on the right-hand side of your screen throughout the webinar. And you'll see it's the private chat function. Remember, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our G4S webinar on demand page after today. So if you miss anything or you want to revisit any key points, you'll have that opportunity. So without any further delay, let's dive in. So our first speaker, Julie Nell, is ready to share her wisdom on setting the tone from the top. Julie brings an impressive 35 years of security experience spanning military, law enforcement, and commercial sectors. She's the founder and CEO of B4 Secure Limited, holds an MA in Intelligence and Security Studies, and is a champion of inclusivity as the chair of the Security Institute. Julie's expertise in threat intelligence and strategic risk analysis makes her uniquely qualified to discuss how leaders can establish and communicate a clear vision for security. Julie, you're very welcome. The floor is now yours.
Hello all, and I hope very much you can hear me. So for me, it starts with a simple sentence, and I discussed this with some other security leaders to gain their views. Leadership in its simplest form is taking a group of people from point A to point B. And it sounds simple, but what I'd like to do is take the next 10 minutes or so to distill that simple sentence and sort of try and understand what it actually means for security. I've made some notes to read from to keep me on track, because it's such a wide subject. I will divert. So point A is, for me, where are you now? What do you see as your function? And by this, I mean, what do you and your organization understand when discussing the word security? If you want to lead, this is a fundamental question. The security threat landscape and the security professional's role has changed significantly in recent years and continues to do so. We've been through a pandemic. There are wars which affect supply chain and investment. There's other geopolitical threats, hostile state interference. We've also got societal issues within the United Kingdom itself. For example, the cost of living crisis, violence against women and girls, and only the last couple of weeks, civil unrest. So with that as a backdrop, I ask again, what does the word security mean to you and your organization? To me, it distills down to the organization keeping it resilient. So how are you as a security leader and your organisation looking at keeping the organisation resilient? What's expected of a security leader now is far wider reaching than it has been before. And as a leader, we must continually keep ourselves at the forefront of our profession. And this involves having a significant knowledge of changes within the threat and risk landscape. Our knowledge is now much wider, or our expectation of knowledge is much wider than it has been before. People look to us now as security professionals to be able to give a good understanding of what's coming over the horizon and how we can support them with it. You'll see some peers, probably within your own colleagues, your own networks, taking on potentially different titles over the last couple of years. I mean, I've noticed it amongst my colleagues, where previous were Director of Security, Head of Security. Now it's Director of Risk and Resilience, Director of Security and Risk. And you'll probably have seen your own title changed over the last few years. And certainly your job description would have probably got a lot larger, oftenly with not much remuneration. I've got a friend now who's managed to collate sustainability as well as Director of Resilience and Risk. She's now collected sustainability into her title. So expectations are now widening as a leader, and you've got to try and adapt to this change and to see where and how you're now fitting into the organisation. I'll give some examples of knowledge and an understanding that you must now try and keep at the forefront of to be able to support your organisation. They could be political, they could be new acts. And one such example coming from the political sphere is with Labour coming into power and their stance on 0 working hours. And you think, well, how is that going to have anything to do with security? Well, it's not just about within your own teams and your own security teams. How's it going to fit in with the contractors that are working for your organisation? What's it going to do? How will it fit in with your organisation's workforce as a whole? What gaps will it leave? And you need to know what your organisation's workforce looks like, what its operating model is. Another is the failure to prevent fraud offence. How will this affect your organisation? Indeed, will it? Do you know what constitutes an eligible organisation under this offence? You can't work in isolation, and not anymore. And as a security professional, you must understand the organisation's goals, its mission, and importantly, other areas of the business objectives and risks, be that from an ops point of view, human resource, communications. And I believe by doing this and displaying this understanding of the other areas within the business and their risks, you can start to bring people along with you. Because as this knowledge, you can then display how security will directly affect all of these areas of the business, and then start changing their behaviours and beliefs on what security actually means. So to summarise point A, ask yourself the question, and that of your peers across the organisation, what does security mean for us? And I think it'll be quite illuminating, because I think traditional views may still be there within your organisation, and then therefore they need to change, or they will have just doubled your job description. So getting to point B, how do you get to point B? It can't be done by you alone. You must bring other departments with you. But how do you get them interested in the security world? Now, I will say that I've got some biases here. You heard what my background is, which is around threat intelligence and business intelligence. So for me, that's either internal business information, business data and intelligence, or external. So my views are going to perhaps be a little bit skewed with how I believe you can bring people along. But I firmly believe in the power of horizon scanning, being proactive, and keeping my knowledge up to date. For me, how can an organisation fully understand its risks if it does not know what the threats are out there to be able to grade these risks? If an organisation is not constantly aware of new threats, how will it be able to identify emerging risk? So importantly, by refining business intelligence, you can help and support making well-informed decisions, be there operational policies, be there your business plans. It will add meaning and a lot more up-to-date and meaningful content. And this isn't just your own within the security world. I'm talking about across the board. I'm talking across all the departments within your organisation. So operations will have business impact assessments. How, as a security professional, are you helping support in those being written up? How are you supporting HR business plans? This business intelligence and this knowledge that you'll be able to support them with can help support training, operational procedures, for example. They will all start getting more update of what's happening within the industry that you're working and specialising in, your markets, your locations. And as I said, this starts with you knowing this as the security lead. This will all lead to being able to mitigate risk and help support a regular review of risk register as well. So if you can start pushing into some of these difficult areas across the business and helping these colleagues and these other members of the C-suite or other heads of departments make more informed decisions, straight away you'll start, I believe, gaining support, even friends. And I know this sounds overly simplified, but I'll give a couple of brief examples. So like I said, security needs to be able to run through the whole of the organisation. So, for example, human resources need to be aware of insider risk. Now, they need to know it's not just a buzz phrase. They need to understand what it means for them and their part to play. And as a security leader, you need to bring it to their table. So insider risk, as we know, can be accidental. It can be from an overzealous employee doing social media posts, photos, but it can also be through mental illness of employees. It can be them running into debt. So you can see how these other societal issues, the cost of living crisis, things like that, can start feeding into a particular security issue for a particular department. By bringing in the knowledge and assessments shows how it can affect the workforce and directly affect your organisation. And they'll want to know how they can mitigate it, how they can learn how to prevent it, how they can put strategies or policies or training in place to prevent it. Operations, as another department, they need to know what risks they've got to their supply chain and what risks their workforce might face. These can be from a brand reputation issues, it can be a geopolitical, how is the conflicts in the Middle East going to affect them? We've got the dreaded cyber risk, often a red on everybody's wish register. But what are the threats to your organisation, to your company, to your industry? So although the impact might be incredibly high, what is the actual threat there? And of course, climate related issues. You think, well, how is that affecting security? But if there's a flood, extreme heat, how is your workforce going to come in into the organisation? How's it going to get to work? And of course, about 18 months ago, we had the utilities risk of shortages. And I'm sure many of you would have had to do crisis tabletop exercise to look what happens. And I'm sure as well, you would have found yourself having to lead on a lot of that. So how will they know about it if they're not being informed? And where in your organisation would these particular threats and risks sit? Would they sit with you? Do they naturally sit with you already, or are they not really known? So again, it comes down to, what does security mean to you and your organisation? So point B, in my view, is having strategic awareness of what's happening and going to happen in the future. And by doing this, you need to understand your internal customers and your external customers. To do this, it may well mean trying to have a culture change, but to bring people with you, you must display those commercial benefits too, because it's not all about threat, it's also about opportunity. With threat always comes opportunity. So start displaying what the competitive advantage to your company would be. Explain it, to your C-suite, and they will start listening more. If you can explain, for example, to operations how, by understanding more about particular threats to supply chain and how they can mitigate those, potentially getting an advantage or certainly stopping commercial or loss, how will that affect them on how they're going to then view your role and how you can support them? How can you show human resources how they can support their staff more by giving them business intelligence about what's going to affect their workforce or what's likely to? So you're effectively supporting your organisation, helping them support and direct resources and finance and strategy. So in summary, you're understanding where point A is, and then you're striving to bring your organisation with you by displaying how security actively threads through the whole organisation, keeping it resilient and commercially viable. And the barometer of this change is when you start getting other directors and heads of department asking for your input more. They'll be asking perhaps for you to jump on meetings around decisional policy, be this at a strategic level or operational level. Unfortunately, it'll mean you have more meetings, but ultimately it starts with you as a security leader to display how you can support them. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Julie, for that illuminating talk on setting the tone from the top. I think your insights into leadership role and establishing a clear security vision and modelling security are absolutely invaluable. So thank you. Okay, so now let's shift our focus to empowering and engaging employees. I'm delighted to introduce Catherine Piana, the Director General of COES and ASA I, and also Managing Director of Help to Protect. Catherine's extensive experience in addressing a variety of security topics, including insider threat, makes her the perfect person to shed light on strategies for empowering employees at all levels to take ownership of security. So, Catherine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Noah, and thank you, Julie, for a brilliant start. I'm going to try and share my window, and it may take a couple of minutes. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm trying to. It worked perfectly, of course, when we tried it out together, but now it seems like, yeah, I think I found it. Right, so here I am. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So I'm going to try and actually take the lead from Julie and bring it one step further. I just want to very quickly share a few elements that I didn't give out in my CV. So I've been a lobbyist at EU level for 30 years and also have given some leadership training and coach. One of the areas which I'm really passionate about, having worked in the influence business, is how people influence others, and that's done mainly through communication. And yes, you've mentioned these elements, so I'll go straight to my agenda. So I want to address three main points in making sure that employees are going to board the security culture. The first one is give out some examples of strategies for empowering employees, some tools to create a culture of open communication, and how leadership can reward strong security practices. Before I do that, I want to give my vision of where security culture sits within the organization. For me, it's a subset of corporate culture. And also, in my opinion, security culture cannot exist in the absence of a strong corporate culture and good management practices. And in turn, security culture gives the possibility to have a solid insider threat mitigation. And what's common to these three elements is the role of leadership, and in particular, the buy-in from leadership, and how leadership gives the example and incarnates the security culture. And also what's common is that it's all about people. It's about employees. And so it's about motivation, empowerment, and engagement. What scientific research says about motivation? This is taken from research that's explained in a very nice and easy to read book called Drive by Daniel Pink. And basically, it boils down to three elements. And the fourth one, I will explain why I added this. These three elements are mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Mastery is really the ability to carry out your work, to have the right resources to do it, the skills, the equipment, information, etc. Autonomy is the opposite of being micromanaged. I don't think I need to say more than that. And purpose is really a sense of meaning about what you are doing. It's the difference between laying bricks above one another and building a cathedral, is really the sense of contributing to something that's wider than yourself. And I've added just culture to these three elements because I think it's important for people to be motivated, that they feel that they're treated fairly, but also that they're able to give feedback and make mistakes without being punished. So that's what science says. And I think these four elements, you will find them across the elements that I've put together for today. So first of all, looking at strategies for empowering employees. Well, you have to help them build some competence, which, yes, is linked to mastery, and give them training and tools to understand and manage security risks effectively. And this will give them a sense of self-efficacy and confidence. Then authority and decision-making, of course, within their own scope of work, they should be given sufficient autonomy so that they can, manage their own scope of work, and this will give ownership and the feeling of being trusted and being responsible. Then inclusion and participation, again within their own scope, responsibilities and skills, involve them in security-related decision-making processes, which will encourage critical thinking and active participation. And in fact, employees know security much more than leaders do, because they have to go through the processes probably more often, and they also know where the vulnerabilities lie of the security processes. So they can be a real good addition. Psychological empowerment, which links to a sense of meaning, competent self-organization, and also to make them feel that their role is important, significant, and appreciated. Then some tools to create a culture of open communication. There should be open channels for reporting. And also it should be clear that when you report, there will be no negative consequences. On the contrary, and I already mentioned just culture and the feeling that you can make honest mistakes and that these mistakes will be treated as learning opportunities and will go back in the loop and processes. Regular communication and feedback loops. And again, the role of leaders here is crucial because they should be seen to communicate about the protocols, the risks, and the expectations, and make sure that in everybody's mind. Then interactive security training and workshops that should be engaging and practical. You can imagine scenario-based learning, role-playing, serious games, make it real. Because as a trainer, I know very well that after a few weeks' time tends to fade away. But if you've made it real, then the learnings are much more likely to stick for a long time. And then make visible the engagement of leaders. Demonstrate their commitment, and that can be done through varied tools such as town hall meetings and Q&A sessions. And finally, the role of leadership in rewarding strong security practices. Recognition, as we all know, is very important. We all strive for it in our daily job. And so it's important that employees or even teams are recognized and attributed to security practices. You can imagine incentive schemes with actual tangible rewards, accumulation of points, again, for teams or individuals who are consistently demonstrating that they enhance security culture. Personalized thank you initiatives, and that can be done in a number of different ways. And finally, ongoing development and opportunities. This can actually be part of the professional development of people, and also being able to, for example, coach other employees or be a mentor for other employees. These are some examples. In my humble opinion, when you apply all these elements, you will actually exceed the planned outcomes and also have lasting effects in security. So again, for me, it's really a matter of layers, corporate culture layer, security culture layer, and then insider threat mitigation. And employees need to be at the heart of this. And as a friend trainer of mine says, what happens at the top happens everywhere else. So that means that leaders really should be an example on a daily basis of implementing security and taking security seriously. And that's all for me. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the panel discussion and to George's presentation.
Thank you, Catherine. I love that quote, what happens at the top happens everywhere else. So yeah, thank you very much for that inspiring talk on empowering and engaging employees. Your strategies for creating a culture of open communication and shared responsibility, I think are truly insightful. So thank you very much. So our final speaker is George Airey, and he will now delve into the importance of building a culture of continuous learning and adaptation. George is the Security Compliance and Regulatory Interface Manager for EDF at Hinkley Point C. With over 8 years of experience in the nuclear new build sector, his experience in areas like security culture and continual learning makes him the ideal person to discuss how leaders can foster a culture that embraces innovation and adapts security practices to evolving threats. So George, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Noura, and thank you, Catherine and Julia. So many of you may or may not know what Hinkley Point C is. So I just want to give you a very slight introduction to what the project is, because it will tie in nicely about how we're trying to maintain and create a security culture that will see us throughout the continuum of the build. So at present, it's a nuclear new build, 2 reactors being built, and we have circa 11,000 people on site during the day. And as part of that, we've got everything from construction workers through to a mixture of engineers, designers, enabling workers, and a dusting of future nuclear operators who are going through their training. So you can see to establish that culture that supports security operations, we're spanning a full spectrum of different people, cultures and languages, with over 27 different languages and 111 different nationalities supporting the project. So continuous learning, what is it about? Well, really, what we're looking for when it falls into the realm of security is two kind of categories. You've got the category of continuous learning and development through your security professionals, through to the security officers who are doing the frontline work on the ground, through to the security leaders and managers who are operating at the top. But you've also got your workforce. And your workforce, particularly on our site, vastly outnumber the security professionals. So you've got to think of how we can get them involved and actively promote a culture of learning on Hinkley Point C. So for us, it's about adapting in place already established organizational learning that the nuclear sector has. And as an organizational body, the nuclear sector is very good at learning from experiences and events and sharing that learning. So as a leader in the security realm, if you can harness that, get involved and have a section within that world and that organizational structure, you can take lessons learned in the security realm and then help formulate your plan. So organizational learning, what is it? It's a process by which an organization improves itself over time through gaining experience and using that experience to create knowledge and then transferring that knowledge across the workforce. And security professionals, as everybody is on this call at the moment, will do this regularly day in, day out. And it's understanding how we can then harness that with our wider workforce. So what we did is essentially, there's already an organizational learning platform. We've taken that platform and we've created within it a security specific area where, as has already been mentioned on here, people can report. They've got a mechanism for identifying what they might perceive as a vulnerability or an opportunity for us all to learn. Because in order to create the culture, we need to understand what our workforce knows. And by getting that feed in, it helps us understand. Recorded events and experiences on your site will help steer your campaign and your security messaging. You know, where do you want to go? What do you want your workforce to do? And that's why it's important that you understand who your workforce is, which is why I wanted to give you that very brief synopsis of the type of people that we've got operating on our site, and how one particular methodology for spreading security learning and developing a culture won't necessarily work with another. And I'll go into that a little bit more detail as we go forward. So what you need to do is set the standards and expectations right from the very onset. And as Catherine always mentioned about senior leadership buy-in, that's very important right from the start of the individual who might be coming to your site, your project, your establishment, and whatever it is, that you've got that buy-in, that everybody understands that these are the messages we want to push forward. These are the rules we need to adhere to, whether it's a regulated site or governed by any other rules. And by doing that, you set that conditions right from the off. And that's why it's really important. And for us, every single opening induction on our project has a senior leader who does the opening 10-minute brief at the start. And that sets those conditions and standards and gets everybody buying in. However, you also want to look for reoccurring non-compliance to your security arrangements. By harnessing all of the learning into one central area, you can analyze the data, understand what's going on within your site, your location, and that can help shape the culture and the rules you want to get across. Invest in your security team. That sounds obvious, and it doesn't have to be financial. It's about education and training. It's a continual process. An initial brief for them at the start of their joining the project is not going to be sufficient enough to see them through their security career. And it's about understanding the new threats that are going to actually impact your workforce and your location. When we talk about the workforce, we're always going to get the rule breakers, the people that aren't going to follow the procedures and the processes and protocols we have in place. But it's important to understand, and you will only do this through organizational learning, is it complacency or is it malicious intent? Learned experience at HPC has shown us that many of our security events that we witness are not necessarily done with a malicious intent, that actually it could be an element of complacency, or simply they just don't understand the rules. They're not understanding the why we have a specific rule in place and the importance of adhering to that rule. And that's why it's always important that when people do fall foul of the rules, everything is looked at objectively. We try to understand the why, understand how we can stop it happening again, and then look at what consequences are in place, if even is required. Understanding your organizational learning and understanding the events that have taken place onto your site will also help you consider what's your desired behavior. How should your behaviors or your employees behave, and what does poor behavior look like, and how are you going to address it? You will understand this once you've gathered the data and understand what rules are being broken. And in one of the questions later, I'll explain how we identified this on the project. So once you've understood where you want to go, where you want to take your workforce, you need to look at how you're going to spread that message. This might be a campaign that's dealt with at a strategic level. It's got buy-in from all the senior leadership, or it might just be a simple message that you want to spread out through your communities of practice, your other people who are assisting you with security. And I'll talk briefly about them shortly as well. But this can be a simple poster campaign, through to webinars, through to all kinds of different methods. What we found with our workforce at Hinckley is it needs to be multi-layered. Sending out a webinar is fantastic for those that have computer access and are online each day. Having communication programs through posters are great on entrance and exit points, but we also find you miss that face-to-face element where we're working predominantly with construction workers. It's about getting down, engaging with them, and letting them understand those security rules from the learned experience, and understanding the importance of why we need to follow those rules. As leaders, that's the sort of things we should be looking at, promoting and pushing forward as we go through. It's also understanding that messaging changes. It's not sufficient to push out one message, another year later, dust it off, push it out again. The threat landscape changes, as we've already heard. Your site will change, particularly if you're project-based like we are. It's changing all the time. We're going to have to reintroduce a lot more stricter security protocols in the next couple of years, because we're now at that part where we're starting to introduce components critical to nuclear operations. And that's why we're now going to have to reintroduce lessons learned from previous organizations, take their lessons and implement them onto our project. But it's not only about collating that information, it's about measuring the impact once you've delivered your message. It's important that you always go back and reevaluate what message you delivered. Did it have the desired effect, and for how long did that effect last? We find that initially in that honeymoon period after our delivery of a particular message, we see good compliance, but then over time that compliance drops. Again, that could be complacency. Is it that we're just not reinforcing the message as we go forward? And that's why it's really important that you do consider that. Look at having 6 monthly reviews, 12-month reviews, and even better, if you have the ability within your organization to commission a formal review of how your culture is on site, then that would be good. A couple of key points I just want to go before I finish is be consistent with the messaging. We found with our workforce that when we change our consistency and we start to deviate from the root message, we confuse people. By confusing people, we then get people who are non-compliant to the rules and regulations. Make it easy for the workforce to understand. And of equal importance is be consistent on consequence. And I don't mean about punishment and so forth, but be consistent that if there is a consequence model in place, it's in place for everybody. And also create the architecture to give the team the help to do this. The supporting documents, the supporting organizations, your human resources, your industrial relations, your security teams are all working together as a common goal. And by learning from each other, you can develop a good community of practice where you can discuss security methodology and ideas that will help them as well as help us. And it's all about that collaboration. So the final point I'll do before I hand back to Noah is intelligently replicate good learning, take learning from other organizations, look at it, analyze your own learning, and see how you can then implement that into your organization. But don't blindly copy, because it won't be a one size fits all. Noah, thank you.
Thank you very much, George. I've got to say, and this is common for all speakers that we've heard from, we're very used to using Google Meet, which has a thumbs up or an applause emoji that you can actually click. And I was sort of kept searching for the thumbs up button or the applause emoji, just because I agree with so many things that our speakers have said. So thank you very much, George, for that. So now let's move on to our Q&A session, and I'll start by posing some pre-prepared questions to our panelists, and then we'll move it on to questions from you, the audience. Remember, you can type in your questions into the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. So the first question is for Julie. So Julie, in your experience, how crucial is leadership buy-in and commitment in establishing and maintaining a strong security culture within an organization?
It's absolutely, it's crucial, and it's fundamental. Otherwise, you're going to be basically hitting your head against a brick wall. You can't work in silo, as you've heard from from George and Catherine as well. You've got to have buy-in. So by getting that understanding on how it supports the organisation in its holistically, in its totality, and how it can exploit community, commercial opportunities and savings, as well as support resilience, that will open doors to you to make sure that the security then starts threading through policy, strategy, and business plans. So it's crucial now. Yeah,
thank you. Thanks. Okay, next question for George. Can you share examples of effective leadership strategies or initiatives that you've witnessed that have successfully influenced employee behaviour and attitudes towards security?
Absolutely, Noah. And I'm going to use one we call the knife campaign that we did on Hinkley Point C last year, which was pretty effective. We had an increasing problem with knives coming onto site. It wasn't through, majority of it is not through any malicious activity. It was predominantly through cultural. In a lot of countries, it was quite the norm to be carrying knives, but on a nuclear regulated establishment, that was not going to cut it. So we looked at how can we change that culture? How can we get that message across? And we took it as a 4-step process. First step was engaging with the senior leadership. We needed a consequence model. We needed to the whole site to buy in, many different employers. That was agreed at that level, and we could then move forward. The second part was engagement with the unions. So it was using the unions to spread our message to say, look, we've got this problem. This is how we'd like to deal with it. Do we have your buy-in? Can you help us spread the message? Can you pass on through your connections? They were in full agreement, so they were brought on board. And the third step then was engagement with the workforce. We needed time. We had to buy time. So we've set ourselves a calendar month where we would deliver the message. This is what's going to happen on this day. For now, if you're found with a knife, it's an advisory. We're going to give you the opportunity to put it in an amnesty bin, and we're going to work with you. And then over the course of that month, we worked with them, and then we had the implementation. On the date, we rolled out the program, and we started with the consequence model. We then collected the data over time to see if we had a positive effect, and it's worked. We've had no repeat offenders, and over the last 8 to 9 months, it's dramatically dropped, and we've had no complaints from the workforce. And people have now, it's just become the norm. To them, it's now normal not to bring it, and that was seen as a success.
Great, thank you. Next one, Catherine, for you. How can leaders effectively communicate the importance of security to employees at all levels and ensure that security is seen as a shared responsibility rather than solely an IT concern, for example?
Thank you for your question. I think also the fact that you say not just an IT concern is in itself interesting, because it's true that when you look at security culture or insider threat on the internet, what comes up is cybersecurity examples, not physical security. So I think it's important that leaders pass on this message, that it's about a whole area covering both physical and cyber, that there are implications of cyber in the real world, and also that the real world can be used to access cyber. So I think in training, giving concrete examples, as many as you possibly can, to bring it home to people so they understand, oh, this is what we're talking about. So I think that's important. Also give some figures about the incidents. For example, the insider threat incidents cost on average $15 million. And actually 56% of this is caused by negligent and accidental insiders. So to also indicate, it's not because you don't have malicious intention that you cannot harm the organization, and the organization is also you. So I think that's also important to communicate. And also, again, talking about fun exercises, make some red teamings where you have a blue team and a red team, and to concretely show what can be done, how you can harm the organization, and yet how you can protect it. So that's my 2 cents on the matter.
Thank you. And another question for you, Catherine. What are some common challenges leaders face in promoting a security culture, and how can these challenges be overcome?
I think the biggest one is how security is still perceived in many organizations, like a necessary evil, or people who stop you during the process of entering the building, or all sorts of things. And so if security is seen as an enabler, you have a much better chance of having everybody on board. And I think that's still a challenge that leaders face. Also some organizational challenge, of course, the way that security, how it's considered, but also the fact that dealing with this complacency factor, I think, is very complicated, because we're all human beings, and immediately after an incident, everybody dies, and then when time passes, this fades away. And I think, making sure that there's a similar level of alertness is important. And also, I think George mentioned it, the fact that there's no coordination between different departments, or Julie mentioned it, I don't know. But anyway, it's a fact that security is seen as kind of an island, and then you have all the other departments, and you don't necessarily have a mentality of all in this together. It's like mini worlds living their lives. So I think that's also an element that's difficult. And another range of challenges is cognitive biases. The fact that organizations may think, well, that won't happen to us, or no, this is not really happening. So actually seeing what you believe it won't happen, and so you're not taking the necessary measures. And also from people's levels, employees, that it's difficult to encourage them to report. So yeah, a range of challenges that can all be addressed, of course.
Thank you. Next question for Julie. How can leaders measure the effectiveness of their efforts in fostering a security culture, and what kind of key performance indicators should they track?
I think I touched on this. I think a barometer that it's actually starting to get through. So as Catherine said, you're moving out of your silo, is how much contact you start getting with other leaders within the organization from other departments, how much they want your advice or come to seek your support on decision making or policy. And I think by giving them the understanding, and again, Catherine touched on it, what security actually means. It's not necessarily just about the cyber attack. It's not about windows, locks and doors being secure and just purely access control. By showing them how security affects their resilience, you will then start getting their buy-in. So to me, KPIs are, unfortunately, your meetings will go up. you'll be asked to contribute more towards operational and strategic documents. And your team will start becoming more involved with other areas of the business, traditionally where they wouldn't have been, I suppose, invited into to supply input. And as I said, although unfortunately that means your workflow is going to go up, ideally, hopefully in the future, it will start becoming smaller. Prices will start becoming alleviated. Mitigation will be more, a lot more stronger for risk, because you have been brought as the security lead into some crucial decision making at the beginning, and policy. So I think that for me is your KPIs.
Sure, thank you. Final question of the pre-prepared questions for George. So in the face of evolving threats and technologies, how can leaders ensure that the security culture remains adaptable and resilient?
Thank you, Noah. Well, it's about staying current as much as humanly possible. And I know that's very difficult in an evolving world we live in, but it's about currency. It's about identifying trends through the data collected. It's reviewing your location, your organization, and the messaging that you're pushing out to the workforce, and the training you're delivering to your team. But more importantly, it's about that external learning from other locations as well, taking it in, understanding, are these lessons that I can identify, and would they apply to my particular location? And then when you're pushing out your campaigns, or you're looking at the messaging you want to get to your wider workforce, it's adapting that material to counter the evolving threat. As I said already, it's not about dusting off the old messaging and pushing it out there. In most cases, simple security messaging that's consistent will help you in many avenues. Certainly, the simple messaging of don't click on links or phishing and stuff like that. They're simple messages, but they will help create a good, strong security culture, which will mean as an organization you're not vulnerable reputationally or physically to a threat.
Thank you, George, and thanks, Catherine and Julie, for those answers. Right, we're now going to move into the audience's questions, and we've got a question from Mike White, and this is for Julie. Given the changes in role and job scene that you spoke about, Julie, is there actually a comprehensive definition of the term security in the modern world, or should we be looking to redefine that?
That's an interesting, very interesting question. There is probably several definitions. There is, around so many of the titles you see. What is operations? What's human resource? And what Catherine was saying, how security leadership role should now be within that directorship and C-suite level, that understanding. It should be right at the top. I think if you start trying to label things too much, it will perhaps not enable you to do what you need to do to try and bring your organization along. And depending on the size of the organization, the roles within it, security can mean so many different things to so many different people. And I've tried to, I suppose, cover that when I'm looking at what it means to me around organizational resilience. So traditionally, I said it was around very much the physical. Then suddenly, over the last, decades or so, you've got cyber threats. So it's now gone into that. But it isn't just those two labels. It runs far deeper. It's about keeping your workforce healthy, because if they're not being kept healthy and empowered and happy, it will lead to potential insider risk and insider threat and others. So I don't believe personally that it should have a label. It can have some definitions, but I think for me, it's more about understanding what it means for each individual organization, using, as George said, about best practice from other locations, from other companies. As business leaders, having thought leadership programs similar to this, discuss what does it mean to you? What is it meaning to us now? How is it changing? But I don't believe we should try and narrow it down to this is what it is, and I'm not doing anything else outside of that.
Okay, thank you. So next question from Mihai, and I'm going to ask this to all three panelists. And I think Mihai is after trying to find out what your superpower is. He's asking, they're asking, what's your greatest strength, and how does it help me perform as a security manager? So, George, what's your greatest strength?
That is a very good question. And there's many people on this call, having looked at the participants while they're speaking, do know me. So, yeah, I would say the greatest strength, really, certainly as a security practitioner, is that ability to want to learn, understand that I definitely don't know everything. I've got an open mind. I want to see what other people know and understand, and then utilize that as best I can to further our aims here at HPC. And I'd say the ability to listen and understand from others would be one of my better strengths.
Thank you, George. Same question for Catherine. So what's your greatest strength, and how will it help Mihai become a better security manager?
I think the ability to adapt, not to fight what is, but adapt to the situation. And I think that's a good key for resilience. Just
Thank you. Yeah, brilliant. And same for Julie. What's your greatest strength, and how will it help Mihai become a better security manager?
I agree with George most definitely around your knowledge. You have to be at the forefront. You have to keep learning, but it's negotiation and understanding those other areas of the organisation and being able to negotiate with them on the importance of security.
Okay, thank you. So I think we've got time for a couple more questions. So Kim Covent is asking, and this is to Catherine, there are sectors where you could superficially say that their corporate culture is the opposite of security culture, like museums, amusement parks, tourist attractions, etc. How do you suggest we align both cultures?
And thank you, Kim, for the question. I think it's got to do with becoming aware of what the risks are and communicating it into the organization so that people get ready for whatever comes their way. And if you're aware of the threats in your particular industry, which are different for museums or amusement parks and tourist attractions, then you're better prepared. And in fact, it's funny because very often security is seen as a little bit depressing when you do security briefing. But I'd like to just remind everybody that when we take the plane, we are all going through a very depressing safety briefing, where we're all explained what we should be doing in the event of a highly unlikely event. So maybe we should prepare to be more open to these kinds of security briefings so that people are empowered, and back to George's point, knowledge, and so they can be better prepared. I don't know, maybe I'm dreaming.
Thank you. So I think we've got time for one very quick answer to this question from Rich Osborne. This is to Julie. Are there any training products or industry best practice guidance that we can offer our customers from the civil service to improve their security culture?
Definitely. MPSA is 100% a starter for 10. Guide them towards that. There are obviously an awful lot of institutes, associations as well that can help with supporting you to deliver workshops and training and help with guidance. And the Security Institute, obviously, I'm going to flag up there as well to help support you. But ultimately, it is down to you as the leader to change that culture and to show how it affects them. And coming back to something, the previous question from Kim was, it's understanding that security is, as a military colleague says to me, security is not a dirty word. It is what keeps your organisation healthy, wealthy, and caring. And it's trying to change that culture. And that does come from you. And as George said, and that's about you learning about and keeping yourself up to date with knowledge.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that's all the time we have for the questions. So as we wrap up, I just want to express my sincere gratitude to our panelists, Julie, Catherine and George, for sharing their expertise and their insights with us today. Your talks and presentations have shed light on the critical role leadership plays in fostering a strong security culture. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you also to you all, the audience, for attending today's webinar. We hope you found it valuable. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any further questions. And remember, this recording will be on our webinar on demand webpage for access later. Please keep your eyes peeled for upcoming webinars from the G4S Academy. That's all for today. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.